This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. My comic shop closed over a decade ago, but if there's one place where I feel that same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Shawn. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me for our official Supergirl movie pregame show and to revisit seasons 1 and 2 of My Adventures with Superman is the host of Missing Frames, returning guest, Shawn Eastridge. Welcome back.
Thank you, Anthony. What a joy and a treat to be back in the guest spot.
So we are recording this on Saturday, June 20th, and it will go up on Tuesday, June 23rd. My hope is that people will be listening to it, perhaps even on their way to the theater to go see Supergirl. But all to say that there won't be any actual spoilers for the film beyond what might already be out there in promotional materials, because again, we're recording this before the movie has come out. Just like we did last year, our pregame show for James Gunn's Superman. I just kind of wanted to check in, talk about how we're feeling as we're heading into the film, talk about viewing plans, share some thoughts, hopes, predictions, concerns. We have some patron comments and questions, so it'll be a lot of fun. And then we'll segue into the My Adventures animated series. So let me ask you first, what are your viewing plans for Supergirl?
Well, I am so delighted that you are releasing this episode on Tuesday, the 23rd. Yes, 23rd, because that is actually the day I will be seeing the movie. I got an invite to the press screening for it, so I will be who knows? Maybe I'll be listening to this. I have a big ego and I need a confidence booster every so often. So maybe I will just listen to this conversation on my way to see Supergirl. That is how I will prepare myself. And I'll be seeing it at the Atlantic Station Theater, which, fun story, is where I saw Masters of the Universe a few weeks ago. And when we came out of the theater, they were shooting Man of Tomorrow right outside the movie theater. So will they be shooting Man of Tomorrow again? I can only hope. Will David Cornsweet come over to me and say, "You, sir, that's it." He'll say, "You, sir." He'll hold out his hand and he'll pull me onto the set. And suddenly I will be a part of that world. But that is my plan. I will be seeing it that Tuesday before, and then I will be seeing it with my wife that Friday, and then we will see who else I can convince to go with me. And I don't normally plan these things out. I think with Superman, for sure, I had kind of done the same thing. I had the Amazon Prime screening. Before that, I had the press screening, and then I had the Friday screening. Supergirl, I am hopeful, fingers crossed, that I will be enjoying. I have a lot of high hopes for the film, but that is kind of what my release week is looking like. But what about you?
Very good. Yeah, lucky duck getting to see it on Tuesday. So you got me beat by a day. Yeah, last year with Superman, like you were saying, they did those Amazon Prime advanced screenings, so I got to see it on the Tuesday before it released. This year, they did not have the same promotion going, but I will be seeing it Wednesday evening through Fandango's Fan First initiative.
Right.
So I'll be at a local theater here with my pal and podcast guest, Mike San Gregorio, my partner in crime, just like last year for Superman. We'll be seeing Supergirl together again, I think in almost exactly the same seats. So we'll really be replicating the experience.
In the same theater too? Like in the same theater? Yes. Actual space?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So that should be a lot of fun. And then, just like yourself, my wife and I have plans to go later in the week to kind of steal away and go watch it for two reasons. One, I want to see it with her. I don't know quite how high her excitement level is, but she's interested and curious enough. But sure. I want to see it with her, but also for myself and for podcasting purposes. I want to make sure that I've seen it a couple of times, because that initial view, you're taking it all in. It's all for the first time. There's a lot swirling around. And then I like to have a couple of days, let everything settle, then go back.
It's hard. I like Superman last year was a great example. Any big movie that you even like, so yes, Supergirl, I'm not as pumped as I was for Superman, but I am excited. But Superman or any big movie like this is going to have that level of expectations where the first time you're watching it is almost just like you said, you're kind of just there and you're experiencing it. And then you walk out of the theater and it's like, however many months, years of anticipation, you're kind of contending with that. And then you're sort of like, how do I even feel about this? And that second viewing almost becomes a necessity, because that's how they get the big bucks too. DC and Marvel, they know, but you walk out of the theater not really knowing. And the second viewing is kind of like, okay, the weight of expectations has been lifted. I can kind of watch it for what it is and not so much what I wanted or what so much like that I'm weighing it against my massive, completely unattainable expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exceedingly rare for me to see a movie multiple times in theaters. But once again, I did this last year for Superman. It worked out nicely. We'll replicate it this year. And we have 2 post-viewing episodes dropping. So the first one I'm aiming to release the Friday of release week. That'll be our first spoiler breakdown. And then we'll do a second impressions episode that following Tuesday, our regular release day. So we've got our pregame today, first reaction episode Friday, second impressions and audience reactions a week from when people are hearing this. So that's the plan. Overall, I am pretty excited. I know I've said this a lot with respect to Gunn's Superman movie last summer, but it held true for that, and I'm hoping it will hold true now. I really feel like I set myself up for success. I felt like I went in with very manageable, reasonable expectations about what that movie was and was not going to be, and I had a great time. And I feel like I'm similarly situated here. I mean, as far as expectations, I do get the sense that this will adhere to the general narrative of Woman of Tomorrow. I think that plot and that overall framework is what we're going to be following. This young girl, Ruthie, who suffered this injustice, seeks revenge, links up with Supergirl. There's the attack. Krypto and Kara get shot with the arrows. Then they take off on this quest. I'm assuming we'll see them on the space bus. I'm assuming that many, if not most, if not all of the planets we visited in the comic will be there. I mean, I would be floored if they didn't do the Kryptonite sun planet.
Yes, that would be incredible. So there's also, I think, a concern of, I really love Woman of Tomorrow, the book, and I think that stands as a superb piece of the art form it's representing. So I think some people may go into this being like, boom, it's Woman of Tomorrow. And they might come out feeling like, oh, well, it was kind of Woman of Tomorrow. So I think fans should probably temper their expectations in that realm. But there's a lot of really cool stuff in that story. And I think, again, what makes me excited is it's not just like, we talked about it when we did the DCAU episode with Supergirl, where a lot of interpretations of Supergirl are just, oh, she's Superman, but a woman. And personality wise, she's almost identical to him, has a lot of the same emotions and feelings and personality traits. So what excited me about Woman of Tomorrow is it was a departure, but not as dramatic a departure as what we're seeing here in Millie Alcock's portrayal. And I think that's the right direction to go. This should feel different, and she should feel different. She should have her own vibe. And I just want to see, like, can they pull that off? Will it feel like, is it something that will get people excited? Like, will people relate to her? Will people like it and not think of it as like, oh, she's just Superman's cousin, but like, that's a character I want to follow. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I mean, especially as far as a DCU where you have a more old-fashioned, goofier Superman, for better or worse, and I know people have their opinions on that, but to lean into a somewhat harder-edged Kara, who's a bit more kick-ass and rough around the edges. It does feel appropriate. I mean, if I said it once, I said it a dozen times in these episodes that, yeah, having that distinction, that differentiation between the super cousins is critical. And so that characterization is one key way. And so I think they're leaning into that. I've quoted multiple times that line from the trailer about my cousin sees the best in everyone. I see the truth. I think that's a great encapsulation of how she sees the world. I'm curious when that line is going to come. Is that something she's going to say at the bar while she's drunk, kind of at a low moment? Or is it going to come later as she's donning the costume or after she's donned the costume? Because I think it could work either way. I kind of opt for the latter because I think that's, for me, I think an effective encapsulation of that difference in worldview. So we have that. Again, I think the overall framework of Woman of Tomorrow, it seems like they're following it. I do agree with you. I think people expecting kind of a soup to nuts adaptation of the comic, I think might come out disappointed because I don't know how closely it will adhere. And when you think about the way that story was told, the fact that it was from Ruthie's perspective and she was narrating the proceedings, I think here Ruthie will still serve as an audience surrogate, but I don't see the story being from her POV, nor do I think it necessarily should be in the DCU's Supergirl's first solo outing. It should be from her perspective, not a supporting character. But so we're not going to have that POV from the comic. I'm assuming there won't be narration, certainly not the level of narration. Maybe we'll hear from Ruthie via voiceover at the beginning and the end. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they did that, but for the most part, I'm not expecting that. So just in terms of how the story's told, I definitely think that's a big distinction. I talked about this when we looked at the trailers and when we revisited Woman of Tomorrow. I'm very curious if they're going to pull their punches with respect to the level of brutality of the space pirates. I mean, they're committing genocide on world after world. There's also that very harrowing issue on the planet with the racism, the division between the blues and the purples.
Yes.
So I'm curious if the movie will delve into that. And I'm curious, like I said, as far as the genocidal aspect of the space pirates, if we'll see as much, if they'll say as much, if they'll kind of pull that back a little bit. I mean, I don't know, but that's an area where I feel like, they might not kind of lean into that quite as much.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a summer blockbuster. So that is what makes me the most curious. Again, comparing it to a Marvel film, the Marvel films, we have to have a joke every 10 minutes. It's like they kind of follow that template, that story, kind of the cookie cutter vibe that we got so used to and eventually burnt out on. So Supergirl I think what will surprise people is I think people will be like, wow, I wasn't expecting it to be so dark. There was a point before they released the trailer and confirmed it where I was saying, it's a risk to shoot Krypto as your opening. Like it is, to have that be the motivator for Supergirl's journey, to shoot the dog, which is something in storytelling they tell you never to do. So that I think shows a willingness to embrace some of the darker elements of the story. It's not necessarily, it's a way to, from the get-go, say, this is not Superman. This is not going to be a bright, fun, happy adventure. It's going to be a little bit darker. We're dealing with a character who is darker, and we're going to explore some darker themes. And I think that's been reflected in a lot of what we've seen in the trailers. But I also think, can Craig Gillespie and the rest of this team balance that darkness with the entertainment value of, what I see is like the same family that went to see Superman last year and enjoyed it going into this. And just like that moment of Krypto getting shot by an arrow, and they're like, their 10-year-old kid is like, Mom, is he going to be okay? It's like, how traumatizing is this going to be? And I love that as a creative risk, but also it's like, is an audience going to respond as well to this? How will they respond to it? It's not going to be as family friendly. So that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true. The crypto business alone does show that they're not shying away from some of those darker aspects. So maybe they will embrace all of those elements of the book. Yeah. We'll see. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they eased up on it a little bit. At this point, I feel relatively confident in predicting this movie is not going to give us Comet the Super Horse. I feel like at this point, we would have seen or heard something, even though I've been avoiding the promotional materials, but still, I feel
5 stars. If this movie shows us Comet the Super Horse, instant 5 stars.
But I will reiterate the prediction I made weeks ago in one of these episodes. I do think Lobo will ultimately serve a similar function, particularly in the climax when Supergirl is going up against the space pirates in the climactic battle. I feel like he will provide that last minute assistance instead of Comet. That's kind of part of the role that I see for him. I guess last couple of questions that I'm curious about as we're approaching the movie. One is, unlike the comic per se, here, like we saw from that clip, we're getting to witness Kara's arrival on Earth, and she's in the rocket with Krypto. Now, what I love about that, I quite enjoyed that League of Super Pets animated movie from a few years ago, back when The Rock was making his power play for Control. but it was great. It was fun, and I watched it with my son, and we had a good time. And there you have baby Kal-El and Krypto taking that rocket ride together. And I liked it in the context of that specific film, that animated film for kids ostensibly. That's not the default that I would want for the Superman origin story. There's a sacredness to it that I feel Krypto being there in the rocket would undermine it a little bit. But I like it for Kara. Like, I really kind of liked it. And I know that in and of itself is a deviation, and we typically think of Krypto as Clark's dog, but I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I am too. And I think what's important is the journey Kara goes on. You know, Krypto is her only friend, really. She is disconnected from everyone around her for good reason.
Yeah.
She's been through a lot. She's traumatized, and Krypto is the only remnant of her life that she has left. So I love, I think when you're doing something arbitrary and it's just like, now it's Supergirl's dog, gotcha, it doesn't mean anything. But when you have a character motivated reason or a story motivated reason to have her arrive with Krypto, it's like, because that's her bestie. And the movie is about what happens when she has to, her bestie is on death's door, and she has to step outside herself to save a friend and kind of reckon with the pain she's feeling. It makes sense to me. And I love it. I mean, it's adorable too. And I love that, you know, I am a fan of the goofy, silly Silver Age vibes of James Gunn's Superman. I love that those vibes still are present in like her space suit and just Krypto being a puppy and being kind of a little punk. I'm here for it, but I think it makes so much sense for Krypto to have come with her based on the story they want to tell about the two of them.
Yeah, totally. It's like you read Woman of Tomorrow and, you know, you buy that she cares for Krypto. It's not like, well, I don't understand why I should be upset. We get it. It still works. But I think this is really hammering home that connection between them. So I like that. Now, here's my question. Do you think we're going to see, or at least be told, where Kara spends the years in between her arrival? Because she seems a bit younger there in that arrival and the events of this film. Do you think we'll actually find out where she spends those years? Because I could see them just skipping over it entirely. And if we do see or learn, there's no way, I cannot imagine David Cornsweet's Superman bringing her to the orphanage. I don't feel like we're in orphanage territory. Does he bring her to the Kents? Does he bring her to the Danvers family or another adoptive set of parents? Or does she grow up at the fortress? What track do you think that they'll take if they answer this at all? And by the way, I really do hope they answer this. I'm gonna have a this will be a complaint if they don't. If it's just like boom, smash cut to her at the bar getting drunk. I'm like, no. I want to know where does he bring her?
There are two things you could do, and one of them, unfortunately, and I think it's the one that's more likely, is the smash cut to the bar. Like, I can just see it already in my mind's eye. Like, Superman's like, you're gonna love it here, and just smash cut to her like, I hate it here, or something like that. I think there is a real fun opportunity though to do the montage of Kara, because you have to, like, you're gonna have to address the fact that she is not into this. She is like, who is my weirdo cousin? Why is he such a goofball? I'm not into that. I don't want to be a hero. Nope, I'm going to go get drunk. Because that's how we met her in Superman, is, oh, she goes off planet to get drunk. So I think it's more likely, unfortunately, going to be the smash cut. I would love to see a montage, not necessarily with the Blondie song, because the Blondie song we've heard many, many times, but some sort of punk rock montage of her, like, just being completely rebellious. Superman kind of being like, Kara, we've talked about this. And she's like, see you later, bitch. And like going off and doing her thing. I think it could be a really fun way to introduce her character in the film, to have that montage, and potentially really effective as a means to show like she's not her cousin. She is not into this whole superhero game. This is what makes her different. I would prefer that version of it. I could see the smash cut version being like her waking up in bed. That the opening of the trailer, I think, is very likely what we will smash cut to. But I'd like to see a fun little montage of her partying and getting drunk. We may see that.
Yeah. I do also like, though, that they're leaning in, at least initially, to that language barrier. And I thought, we saw that in the Loeb Turner, Superman, Batman, Supergirl arc. We saw that in the New 52. I like that, at least at the outset. But yeah, I really want that answered. And I really hope the movie doesn't skimp out on that. But we'll see.
The second you said it, I was like, oh no, I can see it.
The other
there
thing,
she is, hungover.
The other thing I'll say, and this is coming from someone who watched Smallville religiously for a decade, I think everyone does need to be prepared for a lack of her in costume for most of the movie. I think we know, I mean, you see it in the trailers. Ultimately, she is in that full getup, so we'll get there. But I do think it's going to be fairly deep into the proceedings. And once again, as someone who watched for 10 years and then didn't even get to see the whole thing, I think we just need to be prepared. And I think it'll be all right.
Yeah, I think she needs to earn the suit. And I think that may be a part of the film, is her working to the point where she is okay with embracing what that suit means.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be part of her journey.
I'm excited to see the journey that she goes on. I mean, I've said this over and over, especially in response to detractors of Woman of Tomorrow, who really took issue with the angrier, drunken Kara who's spending her birthday alone. Well, first, she's not alone. She's got crypto, but nevertheless. But, my position has been, it's like, even if the inception of it might feel a little bit out of step with what we know of the character, in that Woman of Tomorrow comic, you see her display this compassion and this empathy and this perseverance throughout. It's not like she stays an angry, drunken mess the entire movie or the entire comic book story. So the comic gives her a journey. I'm confident that the movie will as well. And like we know from any good story, you want to give a character someplace to go. And I think one of the things with Supergirl is you do have an opportunity to go on a more complete journey or longer journey than you do with Superman. Like Superman in his film, yeah, he had to come to terms with why he does what he does and which set of parents is really the true influence in his life. And he has that realization and that shift. And that's great. But it was more subtle than like what we're going to get here. Like I think in this film, you're really going to see the character start at one point and really have this entire arc in a I don't want to say in a deeper way necessarily, but it's just kind of a longer emotional distance to go than in a Superman story. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as they stick the landing, that's the thing.
I want to ask you this too. This is another question. The whole thing with Krypton being sending Clark to Earth to conquer, to ensure the survival of the Kryptonian race, is that going to come up at all with Kara? Is that something we're going to save for a future entry?
Okay. We're on the same page, because that was kind of the last big thing I wanted to ask you as far as predictions, questions, because we know from the Woman of Tomorrow comic, we get into her backstory primarily in one key issue 6, if I'm not mistaken, when she's being chased by that orb of, I want to say Dormammu, but Mordru. And she's on Comet and she's trying to escape. And that's when we have the retelling of her whole story, how she survived the initial destruction of Krypton. The people of Argo fled on their floating city, but then people started dying from the kryptonite radiation poisoning. They laid down the lead shielding, but then that failed and the city was going to be destroyed. And then she lost her home yet again. I'm curious in the movie if it's going to be placed similarly, where there's sort of kind of one segment during the film where we flash back to Krypton, a la the book, or if they're going to kind of seed the flashbacks a little bit more throughout. So that's kind of one question. The other thing, though, watching those initial trailers and seeing the glimpses of Krypton and the dome going over Argo that we saw in the funeral procession, my initial thought was, oh, wow, like they're really going to delve even more into the Kryptonian side. I actually don't think we're going to get that much more Krypton than what we've already seen in these trailers and that what we got in the comic. I think I could be totally wrong, but I feel like as far as kind of like the big Krypton moments, I feel like we've seen them, or at least significant portions of them, in the trailers already. I don't think there's going to be like so much more beyond that. How do you feel?
I think you are probably right. I think we're going to see flashbacks peppered throughout. To have a long Kryptonian sequence play out in the film, I could see just being a pace killer. So it makes sense they would kind of, in a Batman Begins way, sort of have it play little pieces throughout. And then at a climactic moment, we get like the very emotional, her having to leave, everyone dying, and all of that stuff. I mean, this is a big question that James Gunn, he's committed to Clark, to Jor-El and Lara, basically sending Clark to Earth to be a conqueror. And it just feels to me like that is it's a big thing for Kara to withhold from him if he doesn't know about it. It feels weird that she wouldn't tell him about it. And I am curious, does that say something about maybe Argo? Maybe Argo has a different perspective on how they should be exploring the universe, not conquering, but as friends, a little bit more like the quote unquote popular version of Jor-El that we're used to seeing. So that's an interesting angle, but I am curious. Like, I think I'm more curious than I would expect, because it's such a big thing. It is such an interesting shift to the mythos that to have Kara be a part of Clark's life and not mention it or reference it or say like, hey, your parents were kind of jerks. They were a little crazy. Feels very strange. So will it be addressed here? I don't know. Will it be addressed in Man of Tomorrow? Who knows? But it does feel like a major thing that needs to be at least acknowledged in some way. So I don't know. I don't know if you could do it in this movie unless it comes through in that kind of political way where Argo is one side of the political spectrum and Krypton is another. We'll see.
Yeah, this is a question. I really, in my heart of hearts, if I had to put money down, I think they're going to punt it to Man of Tomorrow or some future project. I think it will largely go unacknowledged. Just my prediction. Maybe to your point, yeah, there will be some acknowledgement in some way of Zor-El having a different outlook than his brother, or Argo being distinct from other cities on Krypton philosophically, ideologically, maybe something like that. But I'll be really surprised, pleasantly so, because I would like this addressed and explored. Yeah. But I'd be very surprised if there was like an explicit conversation between Clark and Kara about this in this movie. Especially, we haven't talked about this yet, a relatively short runtime. I mean, what is it, like an hour and 48 minutes or something like that? Like, it's something
I am, in theory, like
yeah, not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think one of the problems with James Gunn's Superman is it felt so like it was over like that. But at the same time, it's so easy to put that movie on and watch it. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I'm like, I am here for the shorter runtime. I don't need a 3-hour movie. And I think you could pull off a satisfying Supergirl movie in under 2 hours, but yeah, then you have to fit a lot into it. And a lot of these things we're asking questions about, a lot of things you might want to see probably aren't going to show up.
Yeah, that's why I kind of feel like the Krypton flashbacks will be relatively fleeting. And I don't necessarily expect an answer to that question raised by James Gunn's Superman. In a few days, we'll be back talking about it. And I could be eating all of these words. That's totally fine. That's the fun of doing this pregame. This is like the last instance to kind of make these sort of claims and predictions.
Blissful ignorance before we come back. Oh, I hated it. Ah.
I know. Here I am. I was like, guys, she's going to go on this great journey. Watch, come back in a few days. I'm like, this did not work. But I'm going in with an open mind and an open heart and hoping for the best.
Now, I'm rooting for the DCU. I want it to be good.
Absolutely. Now, last thing before we shift gears into my adventures with Superman, we had a few submissions from patrons. So my thanks as always to the Patreon community for the support and also always for the great comments and questions. It really helps round out these discussions. So Chase says, I'm confident Millie Alcock will do a great job. What I'm really hoping lands is the writing of Ruthie's arc. Without any supporting cast from Earth, she will be the anchor for Supergirl, and I think that will determine how people empathize with Kara. Also, I hope Zor-El is a good guy and contrasts against Jor-El's rule over them attitude. Yeah, like I said, I just don't know that we're going to get that much from Zor-El, but I would hope for that as well.
Yeah. I love, what's his name? David Krumholtz? Is that his name? Wonderful actor. You don't I don't know. I was gonna say, you don't cast an actor like that, but, what's his name? Why am I blanking on
Bradley
his name?
Cooper?
Yeah. He was in the movie for 5 seconds and, so you could, but I just feel like he's such a wonderful actor. It's just, ironically, I was gonna say a very human actor, even though, he's Kryptonian, but it's such a cool casting choice that I really hope for the best. And I think you could play off a really interesting, like, there is a schism in this family between brothers, like on opposite sides of a philosophical debate about how to, do we rule over others? Do we try to discover other planets and learn from each other? I think that could be really cool. And I think that's a fun idea.
And also an interesting flip on what we got in the comics in New 52 and Rebirth, which we talked about, of Zor-El's villainous turn as cyborg Superman. I mean, first as a fully brainwashed puppet of Brainiac, which didn't really get us too far. But then in Rebirth, he actually had some agency and some autonomy, and he was still very, very mixed up. So yeah, that would be interesting.
The Ruthie thing too, I think is a really great point. And I would hate to see her get short shrift, because especially in that graphic novel, she is pretty much the main character.
Yeah. I mean, absent the narration, because that narration, there's so much of it. Like, that's where you're getting so much of her voice. Obviously there are interactions between Ruthie and Kara, but so much is in that narration. So yeah, if you strip that out, yeah, I hope there's enough there. But what I was going to say on the Zor-El front, if there's a key theme that has emerged in all of these Supergirl discussions we've had, it's that in virtually every era and iteration that we're talking about, Zor-El and or Allura survive and come back at some point. Yeah. I mean, we saw it pre-Crisis. We saw it in the post-Infinite Crisis New Krypton territory. We saw it on the Supergirl TV show. It's a thing. So to your point about casting, that specific actor for Zor-El, I mean, yeah, maybe there is an intention of some sort of follow-up. Maybe not, but it's happened like almost every time we've had a Supergirl story. her one or both of her parents surviving and really and it's one of those things. That's a compelling story for Clark, for sure, to be torn between his two worlds. But it hits home, no pun intended, even more when you're talking about Kara, because she has the vastly stronger connection and actual knowledge of and experience with Krypton. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. In terms of viewing plans, Brian says, I'm excited for the movie for a number of reasons, but I will not be seeing it opening weekend. When my family gets together for the 4th of July, after time in the hot sun watching a parade and hitting a local carnival, we cool off in an air-conditioned theater watching whatever movie we're looking forward to.
I love it. That's a great way to see a movie. I'm fully in support of that.
Yeah, he says, I'm sorry I'm not contributing to the opening weekend gross. I know how the media prefers to spin every comic book movie negatively these days, So yeah, but you know what? There are always articles about drop off from week 1 to week 2 and to week 3. So any time you go, it helps. So that sounds like a nice 4th of July tradition.
It's also important to say Supergirl, it has a sizable budget. I think they were saying around 170 million, but that's not as much as Superman. It's more modest as far as like a big superhero movie. And I think to me, a trend that we should steer towards. Not all of these movies they're no longer making $1 billion, but they don't need to make $1 billion. So even when you see those articles, because I agree, we are going to see a lot of, it didn't make 100 million. It must be a failure. It's like, just keep an eye on like, what is it doing overall? Is it going to make its money back? There's more likely a chance it will and make some modest profit because it's a smaller budget than Superman and some of these other bigger movies.
Yeah. Edwin says, I hope it serves as a good introduction for those who don't know the difference between her Supergirl and her cousin. So yeah, right on. I mean, that's the thing. We just talked about this when we did our Melissa Benoist series top 10 episode countdown. It's like, yeah, that introduced the character to scores of fans, just like Smallville before it. It's like, each of these on-screen iterations in particular, I mean, comics are great and they have their audience. We're among them, but these multimedia adaptations, that's where you're reaching so many more people. And each of these iterations that we've talked about and we're going to continue to talk about, that's the first impression for a lot of folks. So yeah, I mean, I hope it lands.
Yeah.
Duncan says, my hopes for this movie are that it's a great movie. I think it's easy in this day and age of franchises to go in with all kinds of concerns about the box office and what it means for the future of the DCU. But honestly, I just hope it's a movie that honors the character and has some real heart to it. Supergirl isn't a massive IP, and it was a bold second movie to release. I see 3 super movies in 3 years as a massive win if they're all great movies, regardless of the box office.
Agreed. I am very delighted that we have 3 years in a row we're going to have David Corenswet Superman on a big screen. That's really, really cool, especially as a Superman fan, to have gone so long without Superman in theaters. It's pretty exciting.
I mean, it's amazing. Years ago now, when James Gunn took over and he stood in front of that curtain for that video and he talked about gods and monsters and his grand vision, and so many of those projects have fallen away in some way, shape, or form. But the fact that the ones that have actually stuck around are all Superman related.
Yes.
It's like, hey, I'm
cool with that.
It's an amazing, yeah. I mean, that's really kind of an amazing thing. Last couple here. David says, personally, I already think the Woman of Tomorrow book is a departure, both in character and tone, from the traditional Supergirl. And I think the new movie looks like it's going to be a step even further away than the book. I hope it does well and is a satisfying watch, but for all intents and purposes, Melissa Benoist is the live action template for me. I think the movie will have to lean heavily into the book's true grit roots to succeed, but I don't think it will.
Yeah. Melissa Benoist is great. I think the big thing for me is I think it's so crucial to have a Supergirl that you don't look at her and say like, oh, it's just the girl version of Superman. Yeah. I think if there's anything you could fault the Melissa Benoist series for, it's like, oh, she's Superman, but a girl. She has the same personality. Just from a marketing standpoint, from a how do we make this its own thing standpoint, it makes sense for Kara to be what she is in this movie. But Melissa Benoist is amazing. She's great.
Yeah. And then finally, Rick says, I hope it does well. Unfortunately, I've had to start blocking a lot of Supergirl-related posts on Facebook because of the nasty comments people have been making about Millie Alcock. We haven't even seen the movie yet, and some folks seem more interested in tearing her down than giving her a chance. My hope is that she delivers a version of Kara that connects with audiences and earns a place alongside the many interpretations that came before. As for your coverage, Anthony, I've genuinely enjoyed this entire journey. Digging for Kryptonite has become one of my favorite podcasts, and your enthusiasm for Superman and the wider super family is infectious. Thanks for the great conversations along the way. So I very much appreciate that.
Yes, I second that, Anthony. It's such a joy listening to all of these episodes. So kudos to you. And it's like, the internet is a magical place where literally anyone who has any opinion about anything can say it, and it can get picked up and used as the poster child for anything. So unfortunately, what you're going to see, and especially when it comes to like a female-led superhero movie, if somebody makes a particularly nasty comment, it's news and it's clickbait and it's going to get a lot of attention. I wish what bummed me out, I think, was Dean Cain kind of, whether intentionally or not, jumping on the bandwagon a little bit to beat up on her. Felt so unnecessary. All of it feels unnecessary, but that felt particularly mean because he knows from personal experience what it's like to be mocked for his appearance.
Yep.
We're playing a character in the same universe. It would have been nice to see him be a little bit more like his character and step out and say like, hey, guy, like, she's going to be great. If it's not your cup of tea, that's one thing, but let's not be mean about it. I think she looks great. I think she's wonderful. I'm so excited, but I get it. Try not to engage with those comments because it will, not to get into this mode, but social media will feed you what you're interacting with. So stay positive and try to interact with positive stuff.
Yeah. And just focus on forming your own opinion is my feeling about this. And this is more just generally speaking, and circling back to this idea of expectations. It's like, yeah, I think going in expecting this to be the greatest superhero film you've ever seen is like not a recipe for success. I think,
yes.
I would be surprised if I came out of this being like, that was an all-timer, one of the absolute best. Like I'm expecting it to be solid, like a solid launch for the character. And if it does that, and if there's some emotional resonance and I feel for the character and the arc that she has, that's a win as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah, there's only one greatest superhero movie ever, and it's Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever.
Release the Schumacher cut. So lastly, on the note of this Supergirl fan journey that we've been on this podcast for the past few months, I want to thank everybody who has come on, yourself included, and everyone who has listened. I have had such a good time doing this. It's not that I was dreading it or anything, but I ended up having way more fun with these Supergirl episodes than I anticipated at the outset of this. And the enthusiasm and the participation and the engagement of our guests and our audience went a long way towards that. Like, I really felt like people were on board. I mean, it's funny. Early last year, I did a run of episodes on Connor Kent, and people seemed to like them, and the numbers weren't bad, but they were like a little soft compared to regular Digging for Kryptonite episodes. And I was like, oh, maybe there's not like an intense appetite for Connor Kent. So going into this, like shifting gears and shifting our focus away from Superman squarely, like I didn't know if people would be along for the ride, and they really have been. I mean, it's been the episodes have been performing great, and we've been getting great feedback. So, I guess I'm so grateful. And I guess I really haven't said this in any of the episodes, but like before this, I don't know that I would really say I was such a huge Supergirl fan. Generally, sure. And obviously I've intersected with the character in so many stories over the years, but this was the first time like I really delved in a much more meaningful way. And I had an absolute blast with it. So I come out of this event now, truly, in a way that I wasn't before, a Supergirl fan.
Yeah, agreed. I think the coverage has been so exhaustive and so much fun.
As long as it's not exhausting.
Not exhausting, exhaustive. It's been great. And like you, going into like a batch of Supergirl episodes, there was a vibe of like, yeah, I'm a fan of Supergirl, but just listening and the conversations around it, hearing about the character's history, seeing the different interpretations, but also conversation, personally, selfishly, I've really enjoyed talking with you about our thoughts on the character, but also listening to all the guests come in and give their 2 cents about what makes her special, how to differentiate her from her cousin. And it really is cool. And I think just like the movie itself, I'm hoping it'll be a pleasant surprise for everybody going into it, that they'll kind of feel the same way that you felt going into the series and come out saying like, I actually had a really good time. I like Supergirl way more than I thought I did.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny looking back before this run of episodes, I think there were only 2 times we did Supergirl centric episodes. We talked about the character a bunch, but as far as like a Supergirl themed episode, we did an episode on the Helen Slater movie years ago, and we did an episode on Tom King's Up in the Sky and Woman of Tomorrow years ago. But other than that, like we really haven't given her the spotlight on the podcast. And for anyone who's really been enjoying the Supergirl episodes, she has a permanent spot now on this podcast. Like I'm really excited to check out the Elseworld miniseries, Supergirl Survive.
Yeah. The first issue was really good.
Right. This look at like, well, what if it played out the way it was intended to? And she arrived as she was meant to and cared for baby Kal-El. So we'll do a whole episode on that when it's done. So Supergirl has a place here. And I think the thing that I came away appreciating more than anything else is the versatility of the character throughout all of these incarnations, whether she's at the orphanage or with the Danvers family, whether she's a student at Stanhope or another university, whether she's a camera operator or a soap opera actress or protoplasm or an earthborn angel or the cousin who was meant to arrive and care for the baby but got knocked off course. Well, whatever the case may be, we've seen her spun in a lot of different ways. And I think some maybe could look at the long history of the character and think, oh man, they just have never known what to do with her. Mm-hmm. But I don't look at it that way. I think that there's a versatility that exists. You can switch up her status quo in a way that you can't really get away with when it comes to Superman, like if we're talking mainline story here. But I think there's a little bit more room to maneuver with Supergirl. And the fact that so many of these stories have been compelling, despite like wildly different takes, really, I think speaks to the strength of the character. So that's, I think, more than anything, what I came away from this process with a deep appreciation for.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of characters in the Superman family that have had as much of an impact that are as lasting as her. What I think is I can really appreciate and enjoy, and especially listening to your series, is writers and creators really tried to give her a justifiable reason to be a part of this and to stand on her own. And I know, and I've said it, just the backhanded compliment of like, she's the female version of Superman. But even in that, with that vibe, she is her own character and a necessary character and a great character. And there have been so many good stories, and it's really, really cool. It's kind of like to see the coverage, and it sort of culminates with this movie this year to finally really get her due in a way, with all due respect to everyone else who has taken on the role and tried to do a interpretation of the story. It's really, really cool. And I'm very, very curious to see how this version of Kara plays out if it becomes more of the like standard version, kind of like how we saw, I don't think it'll be this, but when Robert Downey Jr. played Iron Man, it was like from that point on, nobody is thinking of Iron Man as anything else but Robert Downey Jr. So it would be really cool to see a Millie Alcock version of this character kind of come to fruition. Some people are screaming right now, no, but
yeah, I know.
think it could be fun.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's funny though. I was thinking about this. In a way, I think all of the homework I've done over these past months might work against me in the sense that now I see how rich the character is and how rich the Supergirl lore is. Yeah. And all of these different characters and dynamics that you can pull in. And I really do think, and this is not a knock on the movie. I mean, I think they have a very kind of clear mandate and vision for what they're looking to do. But
by the end of this episode, you're going to rip off your Supergirl shirt and just be like, nah.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a fairly, and I don't say this in a negative way, but basic, using that Woman of Tomorrow as our launching point and that characterization that we got a flavor for in that Superman cameo from Millie Alcock. Like, I don't think this is built to kind of weave in all of these other things that we've been talking about. But now I will know what I'm missing. And so that's the only thing that I'm a little wary of. But like I said, I'm still excited. We covered so much. I like to think we've been thorough. I did have a couple of people ask, what about Supergirl and the Legion? And I'm like, guys, I mean, I got to draw the line somewhere here. But I'm like, I got to draw the line somewhere. I've already done all these bonus episodes in recent weeks. It's like, we will, as I keep saying, I have a lot more to do on the Legion front on this podcast. And when we get there, we will talk about Supergirl's involvement with the team. You and I touched upon it when we looked at how she departed Justice League Unlimited. Zach and I talked about it when we discussed how Kara left Smallville. So we've danced around it, but we'll get into it more thoroughly. We know, especially in the pre-crisis territory, she had this long association with the Legion. In the post-Infinite Crisis landscape, and we talked about this briefly, but she joined the Legion of Superheroes, the Mark Waid, Barry Kitson series, and it was even retitled Supergirl and the Legion. So, I'm aware of that. We will get into it when we ultimately get to Legion coverage, but that was kind of where I drew the line
coming
here.
Up with, what is it, Joshua Williamson?
Yeah, we've got a whole new Legion series launching, which is really exciting. And then I'll also say real quick, there were a few things I read that just didn't warrant episodes for one reason or another, but I did read Being Super by Mariko Tamaki and Joelle Jones, and Cosmic Adventures in the 8th Grade, the all ages book, which was really delightful and a lot of fun. So again, not necessarily for full episodes, but I did check those out as well, because I know those are relatively recent younger reader or all ages books that I just wanted to kind of check out as well. I talk about Smallville a lot, but when it comes to listening, one podcast is at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And while their series rewatch has concluded, the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows on the Always Hold On To network. Step into the refraction with Drunken Avenger #1, The Volunteer, an indie comic by Rick Reason that turns the tropes upside down. 4 men died in 9 seconds. John Stevens survived, but survival has a price. Now, the government calls him a variable. The media calls him the Drunken Avenger, and the city of Meridian is caught in the crossfire between civil liberty and national security. Follow @Drunken Avenger on social media for project updates and previews. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram @SingleBoundPodcast. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. Okay. My Adventures with Superman. So this animated series, we've been waiting a long time for season 3. Like, as of this recording, season 3 just premiered. 1 episode is out. By the time people hear this, another episode will be out. But we had a long wait because there was initially a 2-season order. And they picked it up for season 3, but an animation takes a long time. So, we did an episode on season 1 like 3 years ago, and then an episode on season 2 2 years ago. So I wanted to rewatch seasons 1 and 2 for podcasting purposes, because we'll do an episode on season 3 when it's done. But also to kind of do a little bit of a I'm calling it a watch party here, or just a recap for our audience, because it's been a while. Now, we're not going to be going episode by episode or anything like that, but we'll talk about the journeys that we've had with this animated series, our overall impressions, and really kind of look at the big picture of each of those first 2 seasons. So I know we've talked a little bit off mic about this, but what was your journey with the show? Because you weren't like a fan at the outset, right?
Yes, correct. So I was excited for it, and I'm a big anime fan, so I liked the art style. And I think when it first premiered, I watched it as soon as it was available on HBO Max or whatever it was at the time. And I don't know what it was, but I think I was not into the vibe. It was just not in the right mindset for it. I think some of it had to do with I like the idea of Clark and Lois's romance being a gradual thing that we build to. So the fact that right from the get-go, they were like really cutesy with each other and like, oh, I like you, and like very flirty. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. And then I thought the show, because I watched the first 2 episodes and kind of was like, maybe this isn't for me. And I think the vibe of the show is very much, especially early on and throughout, like that kind of like, it's fun and it's cutesy and it's very anime and there's a lot of humor in it. And it was too much for me. Like when I first watched it, I was like, no, I don't know if I want this to be the Superman animated series that I have right now. And it really, the first season aired and I watched those first 2 episodes and was like, it's probably just not for me. The second season aired and I would see little clips from it. And I was like, oh, I kind of like that. I that seems like a fun idea. And it just came about that 2024, as I was anticipating Superman going into 2025, James Gunn's film, I had been watching the animated series, the Bruce Timm series, with my son who loved that show. And I had that basically on a loop. And I was like, I've seen the show, I adore it, and I've seen it so many times. Let me give something new a shot. Let me try my adventures with Superman again. I just picked up where I left off with episode 3. And it was just one of those moments that I think maybe other fans have experienced this as well. I know I've experienced it with certain films that I thought I didn't like, where I revisit them and suddenly I'm like, what was I thinking? I love this. It was like everything I thought didn't work for me worked. And I think also maybe the first 2 episodes, it was a little like, all right, we got to get Clark and introduce him, and a lot of stuff was happening. And then I think in the 3rd and 4th episode, they kind of start to hit their stride. And then weirdly enough, I wasn't a huge fan of Clark and Lois being so enamored with each other from the get-go. But then they introduced this really fun idea of she figures out who he is right away. Jimmy already knows who he is. And now we've got this trio that can go on adventures together. It's not so much the like, is she gonna find out Clark's secret? How is he gonna hide it from them? It's they know, and now they're a part of the adventures. And I was like, I actually really love this angle. And I really love the trio. We don't get to see enough of Jimmy being involved with Clark and Lois. And it helps make them more a proactive part of the action when they're in on Clark's secret, instead of kind of like Superman has to save Lois and all of that stuff. It felt like they were more involved. And I think from that point on, I just was so into it and so in love with it. And the heart and the humor of it, the action really like stood out to me. And I think it was, I don't know what I was thinking. I was just very, very into it when I started watching again, and it all clicked for me. But what about you?
Good. Oh, I'm glad you came around on it. And yeah, I mean, I echo virtually all of that. I mean, I did enjoy it from the jump. I'm glad you got there. And I think we ultimately liked it for the same reasons. I mean, there's such an endearing charm to it. I so enjoy the dynamics between each of our characters, and certainly our trio of Clark, Lois, and Jimmy. And it's funny, some of this is a repeat of what I said when we did our past episodes, but it's been so long ago, and I don't really remember. So bear with me if I repeat myself or if I contradict myself. But what I likened it to, I know I said this, what I likened it to, and this is a huge compliment, is the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon. This is going back a good few years. But it reminded me of that in the sense that it feels like anything or anyone is on the table from Superman lore. And I feel like they've built out a really deep supporting cast here, not unlike that Spectacular Spider-Man show. And it just feels like a very rich lived in world. And I really appreciate it. And it just feels like there's so much possibility. I think what struck me even more upon rewatch here, I really appreciate the backstory and the connections that they layer in. Like Sam Lane and Mandy Waller have this whole past together. Perry White and Vicky Vale went to college together and they have this rivalry, right? Things like that, I think really went a long way towards just kind of building out this world in a very, very organic way. And it just gives you more dynamics to play.
Yeah. The characters are so well, I was gonna say so well drawn. Literally, they're very well drawn. But I think watching through it, I thought maybe it was a little bit too frivolous, and it ended up being so emotionally enriching. Like it hit some emotional beats that are really powerful and really lovely and like really got to me. And I think this is one of the most charming and endearing iterations of this group that I've seen in any medium. It's an ensemble cast in a way. It makes me think of the John Byrne and the Triangle era, building up that supporting cast. But like almost even more so, like I love it. It's like they kind of are new takes on the characters in some ways. I feel like Clark is a little bit more kind of not goofball, but a little bit more uncertain in a way, and kind of finding his way in a way that's really sweet and fun. And I love that Lois is kind of going on that journey with him. But there's something really sweet about the show, and its emotional core is what stands out to me. And it doesn't pull its punches when it comes to the action sequences, but I think it finds that balance of really beautiful human moments that sometimes you miss with these characters. So I think that's what really, really pulled me in when I started to really get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really a heart there and such a dynamic quality in the relationships and the action. And it's one of those things I tried to get my son into it. We watched the opening minutes of the first episode and then he kind of lost interest, but I will try again a little bit down the line because it is one of those things, to its credit, as an almost 40-year-old man, it holds my interest completely and I'm invested and I'm engrossed in it. Yet at the same time, I would feel perfectly fine showing it to my son. And can't say that about a ton of things. So I really, really do appreciate it. And building off of what you were saying about, you have this rich supporting cast, the fact that like Steve Lombard has a part to play when our supporting cast members get taken by the government. It's like, yes. Right. And even that plays off of that earlier episode in the first season with Jimmy and Steve. This whole thing about whether Jimmy is being left out and he's becoming the Steve of the Lois Clark wolf. Jimmy trio. Yeah. So seeing those payoffs and also watching seasons 1 and 2 together, they really do function nicely. Like Sam Lane alone, the arc that he goes on over the course of those 2 seasons is really, really terrific. I guess one thing that's relatively new that jumped out at me, because when the show started, there was no James Gunn's DCU yet. And rewatching the first 2 seasons, it's like, son of a gun, with a little tweaking, this so could have been an in-continuity prequel to James Gunn's Superman. There's a lot of shared DNA. I think the tone is relatively consistent. The fact that you do have a Lois and Clark in a loving relationship with no secrets between them. And yes, that, for lack of a better term, that goofiness that Clark/Superman exhibits felt very akin to what David Corenswet's been doing on the big screen, and not that dissimilar from what Tyler Hoechlin did on the small screen on Superman and Lois. Now, his Superman toned down the goofiness and was a bit more stoic, but when he was his true self on the farm, there was kind of like that goofy energy to him, very in an endearing way. But I look at Hoechlin's Superman, I look at My Adventures with Superman, I look at the DCU Superman, I feel like in some way, shape, or form, they're cut from a similar cloth, if not the same one. But looking at this, I'm like, oh man, with some tweaking, like this could have been a true companion piece. Not that it needs to be, but it could have been.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think what is so weird about what is My Adventures with Superman in this larger DCU? We're kind of, Superman and Lois got the short end of the stick. It was one of those that was just like, nope, sorry, we got to cut it. It doesn't really fit into the story. But because My Adventures with Superman is animated, it probably gets a little bit more flexibility. But I am still like nervous about, okay, what's going on after season 3? Is season 3 going to conclude this so it can kind of the James Gunn's vision for the DCU can take the full stage? Josie Campbell, who is a co-showrunner on this, and I interviewed her, and it was such a blast talking with her about this. But she has gone on to do Starfire, I think. So she's not involved with season 3, I don't believe, of My Adventures with Superman. But there's a part of me that feels like it would be very easy to kind of say, like, well, My Adventures with Superman could go the same route of Superman and Lois. But to your point, I think there's a lot of similar DNA, down to the fact that, you know, again, one of the big controversial things James Gunn did was, oh, the Kryptonians are evil, quote unquote. And it's a major plot in My Adventures with Superman to the point where some of the dialogue was almost identical. Like, it was, rewatching it this most recent time, I was just thinking to myself, I was like, man, like, people just don't read, like, maybe they just don't know Superman as well as they thought. But even myself, like, having seen My Adventures with Superman before watching James Gunn's, I was like, how did I not connect the dots? Like, this is not something new to this lore. It is something that has been presented before and very recently.
I think a distinction is that, especially maybe for people who are not, or maybe not making the connection necessarily, is that in My Adventures with Superman, you find out that at least Jor-El was altruistic. He was engaging in these secret peace talks with the nations or with the worlds that Krypton was trying to conquer, all orchestrated by their AI Brainiac system. But so there, at least from the personal side, from the familial side, right? Jor-El and presumably Lara, even though we really haven't done much with her yet, were forces for good. So maybe that's a little bit of a distinction. Whereas in the movie, it's like, that's that message from the two of them. But yeah, I mean, in My Adventures with Superman, the idea that they were these space conquerors, there was this whole Kryptonian empire, really, really an interesting spin that, yes, definitely feels like it's speaking to the current big screen iteration. And I have to say, I think people might've been a little bit mixed on the mech of it all and how it was so tech based, especially in that first season. This whole idea being that Kryptonians had attempted an invasion decades earlier and left tech behind that the government confiscated. But then at the start of the series here, you have Leslie Willis, who will become Livewire, who steals a bunch of it, and then it's popping up all over Metropolis, and essentially is the vehicle for Siobhan to become Silver Banshee and to give way to Heatwave and other traditional villains. Anthony Ivo here becomes Parasite in this suit that incorporates some of the Kryptonian tech. Maybe it's the Smallville fan in me because I'm used to the device of a meteor rock.
I was about to say, that's not a huge stretch.
Yeah, like I think it worked here. I mean, there's a part of me that says, making all of those villains in that first season tech-based, right? That it's Kryptonian tech that turns them into these villains. It does kind of flatten them out a little bit. It's like Siobhan is a perfect example where it's like, oh, we're just completely doing away with this whole lore about the evil spirit possessing her. I feel like we're losing something here. However, it tied everything together. And so I think that's a little bit of the trade-off. You lose a little bit of that individuality, but it does really provide a tight structure for that season where this quest to find the tech and to find out where it came from and what this is all about becomes such a big driver. And so I think the trade-off in the end was worth it, especially knowing like we have Superman the Animated Series where you get more individual takes on the villains. So I'm cool with that here.
Yeah, I'm too. And I think part of the joy of My Adventures with Superman is everything is recognizably like what it is. Like, it's definitely like there is the anime style and it is not exactly what we know as far as the comic book roots go, but it feels very similar to what James Gunn did with Superman. It feels like these are people who know the lore and love the lore, and they're like, let's do our version of it. So I think because it works so well in the story they're telling and the vibe they're going for, I'm willing to give it a pass. I have so much love for what they're doing, and they clearly have so much love for what they're doing that it doesn't feel too egregious to me. And I love that at the end of, I think it's the end of season 2, everyone kind of teams up together and it just kind of like, I think you connect them in a way that maybe wouldn't have been as easy if they didn't have this tech that sort of united them all. So I'm a fan of all of that.
Yeah, man, 100%. I totally agree with that. And Going back to this idea of Superman, the animated series, and, you and I have talked about it. And I mean, that's what I grew up with. I love it. I revisited it for the podcast earlier in our show's run. We're going to do a special episode for its 30th anniversary, which is coming up. And I love Superman, the animated series. But one of the things that I think I recognize on some level as a kid watching it, and I definitely see watching it now, it wasn't built to really mine certain relationships. It only even broached the subject barely of Superman and Lois. And even in terms of Superman / Clark's characterization, he didn't articulate or emote a ton. Mm-hmm. That's why I always hold up those New Gods episodes, because that, and mostly it was in the form of anger, but that was where you saw some fire in this guy. And when that gets let out, like at the end of that Apocalypse Now two-parter where he's demolishing that tank, I mean, that's forever seared into my brain. So there were moments where you got that. But here, and I'm not saying I like this show overall better. I love them both. But what I really appreciate here, and you see just the evolution in shows and characterization, it's like this iteration of Clark and Superman, he's got a lot of personality and a lot of character, yes. and he talks a lot. And I feel like you really get a good sense of who he is and what he's about in just a different way. And so I really, really do enjoy that.
The Superman animated series that I adore, I will put it on and I will enjoy it. And it's great and it's fun and it's exciting and it's beautifully animated. But if I want to feel something, I'm watching My Adventures with Superman. And for me personally, I've realized that my favorite interpretations of this character make Lois just as important as him. I think that's the uniting theme of so many of my favorite interpretations is Lois being a primary character and she's not really in the animated series. And I think that's why I love this show so much, is not only is she a primary character, but because she knows his identity from the get-go almost, she is very involved in the action in a way that I think we don't get to see as much in some interpretations of Superman and Lois. Lois is kind of either the damsel in distress or she's kind of like cheering him on, but they found a really fun, creative way to get her and Jimmy involved in the action that makes them feel integral to what's happening in the story, but also doesn't betray who they are. They're not suddenly like, we have superpowers. They're part of the story in a really organic way that makes, I think it gives My Adventures with Superman its edge in a way that it's like, this show uniquely offers this dynamic that we don't necessarily get in a lot of other Superman stories.
Jimmy Flamebird. I mean, one of my favorite, one of my absolute favorite depictions of that character. Yeah. They are a true trio, and not to spoil the beginning of season 3, but you see from the outset that now that trio has become a quartet and they all have their part to play. And I agree. They're not all playing the same role or helping in the same way. I think the show is continuing to lean into the strengths of each individual character as they work together. And it's one of those things, I feel like they played out Clark keeping the secret for just the right number of episodes. And it's only a few. Because it does get to a point, especially if you're really going to have these characters involved with each other, A, she would figure it out, B, he would not want to keep it from her. And I feel like they play that out for an appropriate duration. And this is why it's so beneficial to have a robust supporting cast. Because even though Lois and Jimmy know the secret identity still needs to be maintained, and you can still play that because we still have Perry and Kat and Steve Lombard and John Henry Irons and like all of these other characters. And, talk about them knowing their lore. When we meet John Henry Irons, he's working for Amertech. I mean, again, these are people they've clearly, they've done their research here. I mean, we really, really appreciate that. So, I echo all of that. One question, this now has popped up in both seasons, but we have seen numerous instances where in moments of duress, Superman can access some different power, right? And will turn blue.
Some anime. There's some anime vibes.
But there feels like there's this blue electrical charge behind it. Now, in certain instances, it seems like he's extending his aura. But the thing that I, and I think my fellow Triangle era fans always think when we see these moments in My Adventures, it's like, are we building towards an electric blue? take on the character at some point? I mean, I don't know what the end game is here, but it always calls that to mind. Every time I see that blue electrical charge, I'm like, oh, what are we doing this?
I'm just like, it's Super Saiyan Superman. Like, it feels so in line with the inspirations, the creative inspirations for this show's animation style, its visual style. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see them do that. I don't love the electric Superman.
Fair enough.
I'm not gonna go to bat for that, and I will not be like, I have to see it in the show. But I am. I think it would be fun to see it in this universe and to see what their take is of it. I just love. I mean, the suit, the red and blue and yellow. Like, I just need the colors. I don't love the blue and white and just him looking like some kind of electric god. I want him to be grounded with that humanity. So I don't know. And it kind of just comes into the, like, is there going to be life beyond season 3? And is that a story that could be explored in the future? Because right now it feels like with season 3, with some of the characters they're introducing, it's like, are we doing the death and rain? Are we skipping the death and going to the rain? What are we doing here?
Yeah, so this is not really spoiler territory because this was on all the posters and part of the promotional materials here where, yes, they've talked about how season 3 will be adapting to some degree or another Reign of the Supermen. And I think all of the writers were given the trade paperbacks to read, and the poster features Cyborg Superman. And previously we had introduced Hank Henshaw. Another connection there that Lois and Hank had gone to college together, right?
Right. Everyone's gone to college together in this show.
And they're
all college buddies.
Exactly. And we've seen a Superboy, very Connor Kent looking Superboy in the promos as well. I was going to say this for the end, but I'll say this now. I'm excited for this season. The fact that they're borrowing anything from Reign of the Supermen obviously always speaks to me. I am really checking myself here because I got tripped up with the final season of Superman and Lois. It was not the Death and Return of Superman adaptation that I wanted personally. And I've made my peace with it. I've accepted and come to respect the specific story they were telling, which borrowed certain elements and themes, but was its own story.
Right.
And I've made my peace with it, but I really had a hard time with season 4 for that reason initially. So I'm going into season 3 with the understanding, no, this is not a full adaptation, as far as we know, of the Death and Return of Superman, but this idea of additional Superman or replacement Superman showing up, being similar in some ways, but not fully there in others and more important ways. That core idea, I think that's the theme that's going to play out. And so to have a version of Cyborg Superman and Superboy, and we already have Steel, and we'll see what they do on the Eradicator front, I'm excited to see it. And I'm going in with the understanding and with the acceptance that this is going to be its own thing that's taking some inspiration, but I'm not expecting a direct adaptation. And I keep saying this, not even so much for the podcast, but for myself. I'm just like reminding myself.
Hyping yourself up. I think that's the right approach too. And I think it would be disappointing to expect kind of a note for note adaptation. Because I don't know if you could do a satisfying one. And in this universe, I don't know that we've had enough time with these characters. I don't know that I would want to go into the death of Superman so quickly.
There's also, as much as I hold up the Death and Return, it's sacred to me, but there's something to be said for, well, what does the story look like if a Superboy and a Cyborg Superman and an Eradicator Superman show up while Clark is around and active? Like we saw in Reign, him coming back and finding them already established in this world, and he's got to take care of them. But yeah, what does it look like when they pop up and he's there? That's distinct. So I'm excited to see them put their own spin on this. I really am open. Now, I can't believe I've waited an hour and a half to do this, but you talked about your journey with My Adventures. Didn't love it at the outset, really came around on it. I did enjoy it from the jump for all of these reasons we've been talking about. When it came to season 2, I didn't love it as much. And we did an episode on it a couple of years ago, and I went back and I listened to a little bit. And I don't think I was unfairly harsh on it, but I was a little hard on it. And I had a few objections to it. And on rewatching it, I came away with a vastly more positive view. And so once more, and I say this all the time, this is a journey, and a man can have a change of heart, and it's good.
I was going to ask, what was it about it that didn't really appeal to you?
Yeah. So by the way, it's not like I hated it, but there were a few things that didn't totally work for me. And perfect that we're talking about it here because season 2 introduces Kara Zor-El. So yet another iteration of Supergirl here. And it also introduces an AI version of Brainiac, voiced by Michael Emerson of Lost fame. But I had a few objections, and I talked about these at length a couple of years ago. But basically, the communication issues that pop up, particularly between Clark and Lois, and even between Clark and Jimmy, felt a little bit contrived to me. Like this notion that they just can't find the time to talk about it. But rewatching it, I think there are numerous instances where it's not even really a matter of time, but Clark realizes this isn't the moment, right? Because Lois wants to track down and find her father. Well, Clark's not going to bring up the business about the beacon in that moment, right? When he overhears Sam and Lois talking about how Clark is different, and Lois is like, yeah, he is different. And then Clark flies off and he misses the part where she's like, but that's why I love him.
Right.
a little bit eye rolly for me, but overall, in rewatching it, I guess what I appreciated more this time was how they really kind of piled up these missed connections, so to speak. It wasn't just one or two instances. I think you see, and with Jimmy in particular, when Jimmy's on stage at this event that ends up being this whole anti-Superman rally, basically, and Lex cites Jimmy as the person who helped inspire him, and that causes a little bit of friction there, even though Jimmy, of course, never wavered in his support of his friend. But all of these things were happening that were tying into Clark's sense of loneliness while this opportunity to connect with his lost cousin presents itself. So I just felt like there were enough instances that kind of piled up where it worked for me. Also, I think I kind of unfairly was expecting these cartoon characters who've only been dating for a short amount of time to have the emotional equipment that my wife and I do as we've been married for 10 years. And I'm like, well, they would just talk about this. It's like, these are young characters, new in a relationship, and it's a cartoon. It's a sophisticated cartoon, don't get me wrong. But still, if certain aspects of it are a little bit more broadly drawn, so to speak, I think we can forgive it that. So I've really kind of eased up on my issues on that front. Then the Brainiac and the Supergirl of it all. So with Brainiac, the choice of Brainiac and going with the AI version, we've talked about all the different versions of Brainiac, but going with the AI Brainiac totally tracks given the whole Kryptonian tech angle of the first season. So now you find out, there was this AI system that was coming up with all of these war plans to conquer. Like that totally works. The issue I have had with this Brainiac is that he's Brainiac. He tells people to kneel and he's bent on conquest a la Zod. He presents himself as Kara's father a la Zor-El. He employs the Eradicator protocol like the Eradicator. I'm not totally off of this complaint because I do still feel like they smushed an awful lot together here. But side note, there's a part of me that's like, oh, this could have been Zor-El Cyborg Superman. Like they could have gone down that road. Obviously they didn't. But the thing that kind of won the day for me upon rewatch, and I have to give a shout out to audience member Tim, because he had basically posted this in our Facebook group after I did my episode with all of my complaints. But rewatching it, this Brainiac, between the vocal performance, the visual design, which was really striking and eerie, and the unhinged nature of this Brainiac, it really won me over because he is cold, but he'll laugh. And there's a more sinister side than you typically see. And he's trying to implant his AI consciousness in Clark's physical form, which also typically something you don't see. So this was a more unhinged Brainiac. And so between that, the design and the vocal performance, I really kind of came around on. And I think the overall effect worked, even if I still wish they had maybe just kind of sliced off a couple of the other villain attributes.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's funny. I am willing to give so many things a pass if I am invested in the story and characters, because I think rewatching season 2, I was like, man, this Brainiac is like a really strikingly different version of this character down to the visual design. It's like, this doesn't even really look like Brainiac except for the animated series.
Yeah. The 3 dots. Yeah.
Yes. Which is great. But it never really occurred to me watching it the first time, because I was just so into the vibe the show was going for and the visual style. So I was kind of like on board to the point where it's like almost in retrospect, I look back and say, yeah, they made some kind of crazy, wacky decisions and some choices that maybe I wouldn't have been as on board with if the show hadn't been so effective at winning me over. So a lot of what I loved about the Brainiac and Kara stuff is just, I love the idea of Kara being kind of like a Kryptonian Soldier kind of brainwashed. I liked that angle for her character, that she too is like, doesn't have a family anymore, has been turned into this destructive force. And Clark has been terrified that he is supposed to be this destructive force, and he's made a concerted effort to go like completely depart from that. And I just love that what brings him together with her and what rescues her ultimately is his love for her. And one of my favorite moments is like that moment at the end where it's like he has the fist and wraps around into a hug.
Yeah.
I was like, this is Superman to me. It's not about the punching. It's about he is there to care for you and he's going to help you through this. And I loved that so much. It speaks to what I love about this series, just that full embrace of the heart of this character. And the Brainiac stuff, I think watching back this time maybe didn't work as well for me, but not to the extent that I didn't enjoy it. But I think I really, really, I love the Kryptonian Brainiac. I love the version of him that is the kind of preserver of Kryptonian culture. I think it makes it really interesting. I haven't read a lot of the Brainiac stories of him just being like what he is in the Silver Age. I just am in love with the animated series interpretation. And to me, I'm like, that's canon. That's the lore that I accept and am completely on board with. So I like that they went that route and we're going in that direction. And I think this time around, it was just like, yeah, that design really is different. And how do I feel about it? Does it work for me? Overall, yes. But I think it was interesting watching again and feeling a little bit more like, wow, they really did kind of go all out in trying to differentiate their version of this character.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and this is a departure. This isn't the Brainiac who's seeking knowledge. This is a conqueror. So yeah. I'm still a little bit mixed on this, but I think in rewatching, there was more that I liked about the Brainiac than I disliked. Now on the Supergirl front, interesting here that after 20 years at this point, almost, of the version of the Supergirl story where she's older than her cousin and she's meant to arrive and care for the baby, but she gets stuck in suspended animation or in the Phantom Zone, depending on what version we're talking about. Here we're back to a baby Kara who's departing Krypton and is found and taken in by Brainiac, who acts as this cruel father, right? Raising her in the ways of a Kryptonian soldier. So it's just interesting, neither positive nor negative, but it was just kind of interesting to me that we kind of deviated from what was pretty firmly established at that point. One of the things initially I did take issue with was that she's just full on brainwashed and puppeteered and made to commit these genocides. I part of me does still say there's arguably another version of this. You kind of get it where she does believe she is spreading the Kryptonian way, and she does buy into that. She just doesn't realize that all these planets are then being destroyed. So yeah, maybe it's doing what I want. Because I guess what I was going to say is like, there's a version of this where she's not brainwashed, but she's also not committing genocide either. Like, So she has more of a turnaround, but it's not like she's been full on controlled. But then I say to myself, like, once again, kind of bringing this all full circle, what are these continuing themes of Supergirl that pop up in all of these different iterations? And call it what you want, but trauma to some degree or another. And this is not the Supergirl who lived through the destruction of Krypton 3 times over, like we see in Woman of Tomorrow. But she was raised by this cruel robotic father and brainwashed, and she has to break through that. And she ultimately does. And so I think in that sense, it is kind of true to what we've been talking about here. And I mean, this also does allow you to keep the character cleaner as far from a guilt perspective, right? Even though she's been made to do these things, it's truly not under her control. It's like if she were simply misguided and conquering these worlds, even if there were no loss of life, then it's still, maybe that gets a little bit murkier as far as how much we really are going to root for her. So, and what I really did love is they really play up the fish out of water angle, like when she's trying ice cream and hot dogs and continuing to call Jimmy Flamebird, and she thinks he's the leader of the planet. And even the
this is, what we were discussing where it was like, oh, in the DCAU, she and Jimmy had this little thing in her first episode, and now we actually get it's not the same version, but it is the Jimmy Kara ship that we wanted for the original animated series.
Yeah, so at least on this show, you get to see the Kara-Jimmy dynamic play out. Funny enough, we didn't mention this, I don't think, in our Smallville episode. We talked about the Jimmy-Kara dynamic there, but when Kara first sees Jimmy on Smallville, She has a heat vision eruption, which the show has taught us is the Kryptonian body's response to sexual arousal.
Yes, right. So
I just wanted to mention that
missed
here.
opportunity once again.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing, kind of going back to the discussion you and I had about the Kara of the DCAU, here similarly, even though they're cousins, but they are leaning more into that big brother, little sister dynamic, I feel, which I quite like. And I feel like you see that in a couple of instances, even from the jump when they're on the ship, when Kara first takes Clark and he finds the photos of her with Jimmy, and he's kind of teasing her about it. And then when they're out there essentially playing catch with asteroids.
It's so good. I like all of that. And I think what's fun about this version of Kara too is that she's more Kryptonian than not. Like, she is not completely like, oh, I'm just like a cool kid and I'm here and I'm having fun, which is it's kind of a weird thing that they do with Supergirl in a lot of versions, that she's just kind of like, even though she was raised on Krypton in Argo City, and then she shows up on Earth, she's just kind of like, yeah, I'm pretty much just like Clark. Like, I was basically raised here. And it's like, were you though? So I like that this version, she's still kind of awkward and is like, what is this thing? And what is that? It makes her and Jimmy's romance, it gives it that fun angle, because it feels a little bit, I think a complaint I have is it does feel a little bit like we're repeating a lot of the same beats as Clark and Lois's romance, where they're just kind of being cutesy and awkward and like, oh, do you guys like each other? And so I think it gives it kind of a different angle, having her be sort of, like you said, fish out of water.
And she's got a little bit of an accent, especially when she says Kal-El. That's not even correct, but you know what I mean? Which I like. I like that little flair, because that was something that came up in our New 52 discussion, and obviously you can't hear it in a comic, but like characters make reference to her having an accent. And it's like, oh yeah, like that would be a thing or could be a thing. So even just the way that she says her cousin's name here, I really kind of like that. Very mild spoiler for the season 3 premiere, but I do love that there's a discussion between Lois and Clark. And Clark essentially calls out Jimmy's lack of romantic history, right? Because this whole thing, like, very tentative early steps between Jimmy and Kara, and Lois and Clark are talking about this. And he's like, yeah, like, I don't think either one of them has any experience. And then Lois has that remark like, oh, I get why you guys have bunk beds. Like, the bunk beds make sense now.
Yes. Well, it's sweet. And it'll be interesting to see how that relationship plays out, because it's a pairing that makes so much sense to me that when I saw it in My Adventures with Superman, it was like, well, yeah, of course. And then you think about it and you realize, like, they don't really do this. They've missed every opportunity to do this that they've had. And I think our conversation when we discussed it was what really hammered that point home to me, and is what makes me really excited to see how this interpretation handles it. It's a fun dynamic for both of their characters.
Well, yeah, that's the funny thing, because as much as I think a lot of us kind of but we cite this idea of, oh yeah, like Supergirl and Jimmy, it's a thing, but it's like, but is it really? Yeah. I mean, other than maybe
think of anything,
maybe some imaginary stories in the pre-crisis territory, but modern day, not really, or it's only kind of lightly delved into, like Smallville, or like the little hint that we saw in Superman the Animated Series. So here to actually see it start to play out, like, yeah, I quite like that. So yeah.
What if I'm going to pitch something? What if Skylar, his Superman in James Gunn's film, the ladies man, he gets every girl he wants. He is madly in love with Kara, and she is the only lady who is like, no, not into it.
I love it.
And it drives him insane. Like,
I love
he becomes more obsessed with her. So
sign me
that's
up.
another way we can get a Jimmy Kara. I think this is just a ship that I have wanted for so long, because it does mirror the Lois Clark thing, where it's like Clark is not human and she is. And I love that dynamic, because Jimmy and Kara are typically seen as younger, a little bit more inexperienced, and a little bit more immature. It feels sweeter to me, like that kind of teenage romance vibe. So I'm here for it.
We'll say, talk about other themes. I mean, pre-crisis territory, there were various suitors like Jero from Atlantis and Dick Malvern and various characters. But I would say in the modern era, across media, I don't know that Supergirl's romantic life has really been explored, maybe to the extent that it could or should be. I mean, we talked about this recently, like the Supergirl TV series, 6 seasons. And in the first season, yes, there's this will they, won't they with her and James. And then that gets put to bed, but not in that way. And then in season 2, right, it's all about her and Mon-El. But once that ends, that's it for the most part. I mean, there's another reporter at the Planet she has a brief little romance with later on in the series, but that's pretty minimal. So you would imagine for a 6-season series, there would be more. And to be clear, I'm not saying I want the character to be defined by her romantic relationships or interests, but it's an avenue that could be explored. So like, I'm glad My Adventures is doing it. And yeah, moving forward, like, I don't think there's any aspect of that in this film that we're about to see, but down the line, boy, do I like your pitch.
I mean, I'm a hopeless romantic. And I think you brought up something interesting. I think maybe what's happened with Supergirl is the creators and the writers are so fearful of like, oh, she needs a man in her life. So they are really departing from that. And I don't think it needs to be that. It can just be like, she just falls in love with somebody. Like it, just like Clark has, just like Lois has, like it can be completely fine. And I get the hesitation, but also for me, I'm like, I want all the romances. I want everyone to pine longingly for each other. I adore Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man. So for me, all those longing looks and, oh, if only I could be with Mary Jane, but I can't because my Spider-Man life would ruin everything and put her in danger. I'm all up for that. So romantic pining in superhero lore, it feels like it's very male centric. So I think it should be totally fine for Supergirl to pine a little bit. I think it would be totally okay.
Yeah. And to your pitch about her and Skylar Gizondo's Jimmy, it's like, yeah, I don't think that Jimmy would have any qualms about needing to be rescued by her and would be perfectly fine. You know, I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I particularly like that pairing, but whether it's Jimmy or another character, yeah, it's like, I would like to see this explored. So, oh yeah, overall, I really had a great time. It was very eye-opening to go back and maybe too is the fact that I was watching both seasons in a row.
Right.
And I really did it in a binge and they really do work as a 2-season story. It felt very complete. So I really appreciated that. So yeah, I mean, I can sit here now and say, no, I was wrong the first time around. I don't think I had a bad take on the season. I think I understand why I had those objections, but with time, rewatch, and watching it all together, virtually all of those objections I had really melted away. And now I can look back at season 2 and it's like, no, it really holds up. The last complaint that I had originally pertained to Lex and just kind of felt a little weak sauce to me, but I look at it now and even going back to season 1 and it's like, no, but I think it's just a really slow burn with this Lex. Yeah. And I think we're really building up to him being more of a force to be reckoned with. But yeah, you're starting with, he's an assistant to Anthony Ivo and then he aligns with Waller and he gets involved with the Ameritech and he launches his own company. And you're seeing him kind of take these steps, but it is a little bit more in the background, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I've really come around on that too.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Lex is one of the weaker points of My Adventures with Superman. And I think, again, because I'm so enamored with the version of the characters that they've presented, and again, just the Jimmy Lois Clark dynamic, I love that so much. And there is a vibe of like, well, where does Lex fit into that? How does that work? And what's funny is this version of Lex feels like it owes the most to the Snyderverse. The Eisenberg version. And I love Jesse Eisenberg. I am not a fan of his Lex, but the DNA is there. And I think it's cool to see them kind of, because that version very much like, that was very cut off. They did not get to see that version to fruition. So to see it kind of reappear like a spiritual successor to Jesse Eisenberg's take is kind of interesting. And I think to your point, it's a slow burn. And to me, my big thing is almost, I find myself not really caring as much about a Lex Superman relationship in this series. And to me, like, it's like saying that out loud. I'm like, that's kind of crazy because that is the, other than Superman and Lois, Superman and Lex is such a crucial relationship. So to have Lex play such a small role up to this point, and for me not to really be bothered by it is kind of nuts. But I'm very curious to see, like, can they kind of loop around and then make him more involved, make him the ultimate rival. Are they going to go in that direction, or is it just going to be a different version of that? And I think so far I'm okay with either one. I would love to see the ultimate showdown between Superman and Lex, but also I don't know. We've gotten a lot of interpretations of that. So there is a part of me that's okay with it being like, well, maybe he is just kind of like less prominent as a bad guy in this version of the story.
Yeah. A couple of things. So one, yeah, I mean, I am totally with you. That was the thought I had. As much as the rest of the series really feels like it could have been a prequel or a companion to Gunn's universe. Yeah, this Lex does feel like this could have easily been a younger iteration of Jesse Eisenberg's Lex. He's got a full head of hair, young tech bro, tech nerd. It's like, yeah, I could totally see this. So that was just kind of intriguing to me. I think we're kind of getting at a similar idea here where he does feel a bit out of place. He does feel like a bit of an outlier. And what's funny, like we were just saying moments ago, I think one of the great strengths of the series is how you do have all of these personal connections between so many of our characters and the shared history that gets referenced. So I think that's part of the reason why, because he really is kind of an outlier. And I don't know that his outlier status thus far has really been used effectively. Like, I don't know that it's added anything. Arguably, it's taken away.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry to always make this my pitch, but here it feels most appropriate. Like, imagine if he had you guys know where I'm going with this. Imagine if he had a past with Clark in Smallville. If there was or he went to college with Clark and Jimmy or something. Like, if there's some past personal connection.
Maybe they could still go in that direction. Maybe there could still be something there. It does feel like he's a little too disconnected and the personal connection is not there in a way that it needs to be there for this to work. And so I don't know. Again, I'm just curious to see what they do with it, because they've been kind of on point with, like, they've done different things. They've been dramatically different, but somehow I've enjoyed them so much, it's tricked me into not recognizing just how different they are until I look, like with Brainiac, where I'm like, whoa, wait a second. That is a pretty dramatically different take on Brainiac. It has the DNA and the core of some ideas that I think the Bruce Timm iteration did, but in a lot of ways, it's very much its own thing. And I think I'm curious to see, where will Lex fit in to this larger story? Will he fit in a crucial way, or is he going to kind of be the tech bro version that doesn't necessarily have that connection? And is that okay? Like, am I okay with that? So far, I've been okay with it, but it would be nice to get kind of a Superman Lex story in this version of the character.
Well, because, one of the things I would ask at this point, and I'll pose it to you, maybe get your take on this. Like, we do have Lex spouting anti-alien rhetoric, right? At that seminar in particular, when he's on stage with Jimmy. At this point in time, do we think Lex genuinely believes that? I think there's enough there, especially after what he witnessed with Ivo and the battle at the tower when they were having the party and all of that. I guess we can believe, because I guess my question is, like, do we have a firm enough sense of his actual true ideology? Like, we know what he's saying. Is it truly what he believes, or is it a means to an end? Is it a means to garner public support? I think we kind of have an answer, but I don't know. I wouldn't mind that fleshed out a little bit more, as far as, like, what's his true beef and his true agenda here.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that up, because I think maybe that's what our like the note beneath the note is that so much, I think, and this is partly why I like the version of Lex where he's introduced to Superman when Superman is introduced to the world, as opposed to them being friends when they grew up together in Smallville. I think what's so fascinating about Lex's hatred and sort of fascination with Superman is the fact that Lex is like, I am the epitome of humanity. I am everything humanity can accomplish through hard work and study and genius. And, like, I have worked so hard to get to where I am. And this guy just comes along and everybody loves him. And he's got all these powers and he didn't have to work to get, the all-star Superman stuff that Grant Morrison did between the two of them is so good. But I think that dynamic is so fascinating. So when you lose that, when you don't have Lex kind of operating at peak form, where he is kind of like, I'm just a tech, like little nerdy tech guy kind of building my way up, you kind of lose that version where he's like, I am the peak representation of humanity, and therefore I am humanity's representative. I am standing up against this alien who thinks he can come in here and be the best of us. So it's like they're taking the idea that Lex is constantly like, he's not human and therefore like he's a problem. It's like, yeah, that still works and that's still an interesting angle, but what makes it most interesting is that Lex is like, he's LexCorp and he is like the golden boy of Metropolis until Superman shows up, and then all of a sudden he has to contend with that. And I think maybe that's what we're kind of like, where is this going? And if we're going to go in the direction where Lex is kind of like humanity all the way and get rid of this alien, maybe it just doesn't work as well when it's not that version of Lex who is already at the top.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you say that because I wasn't thinking about that with Lex so much, but it did strike me with respect to Lois. It's like, yeah, she's been an intern slightly longer than Clark and Jimmy, but they're really all at the same level at the planet, which is a departure. I mean, in virtually every iteration, it's like she's the veteran, she's, you know, top dog at the planet, and then she's got to show the new guy around. So it's funny. It's like, except for Superman himself, it's like a prequel for most of the rest of the characters. Like they're at an earlier point in their journey, but Clark isn't like it. So you're seeing the Superman story with earlier incarnations of Lois and Lex in a way. But I get what you're saying. And yeah, I think with Lex, especially if there is some dissonance, I think the fact that he is such an outlier and that, yeah, he's so differently situated than we've seen him, certainly in any modern interpretation. My God, I mean, even if you go to a prequel like Smallville, it's like even there he was still the son of this billionaire, and right, and he was involved with the company. So you had that dynamic to play. So yeah, really interesting. I maintain an open mind about what they can do with this character. I'm excited to see it play out. It is not,
to be clear, it is not a breaking point for me if like Lex doesn't end up being anything more than what he's been. I still love the show. It just is kind of interesting that if we get to the end of this and there's no big Lex Superman thing, it's like, oh, well, that's kind of the first in a way, but it almost is par for the course for this show. It's doing a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to your point, I truly hope it continues to exist. I mean, the fact that they're planning My Adventures with Green Lantern and the Starfire series, it's like, I hope that you can have this little hub of shows that they're their own thing. And what I would hope, assuming it performs well, obviously, but what I would hope is that it's disconnect from the DCU canonically. I hope that wouldn't be a knock against it. And I would hope that James Gunn and Peter Safran would look at this and A, appreciate and enjoy it, but B, also recognize like, oh, this is speaking the same language as what we're doing in the films. Right. This is a natural connection point. And I would hope that's the case. And that if nothing else, that whenever it ends, whether it's this season, next season, I just hope that they have enough advance notice, or they plan an ending that could work either way, and that we don't end, that we don't end on a cliffhanger. More than anything, that's what I want, just to have some level of closure whenever that end comes, though I hope it doesn't come for a while. Like I said, I had a blast with the rewatch. I enjoyed the season 3 premiere. I'm really excited to see where this goes, especially their take on Reign of the Supermen. When the season is all done, we will do a reaction episode. I've got V. Ken Marion on deck to return. He joined me for season 1. And he'll join me and we'll talk through it. So I'm really excited. I hope everyone enjoys the season to come. And Shawn, I thank you so much for joining me for this pregame show. We got to talk about our thoughts, our expectations, our questions, our concerns about the movie. And we got to revisit seasons 1 and 2 of My Adventures with Superman, which, like we said, also included yet another iteration of Supergirl. So it all ties together here. I thank you so much. I hope you enjoy your Supergirl viewings. I know we'll message, we'll talk about it. What do you want to share with folks about your podcasting?
Well, you can find me on, wherever you do your podcasting, on the Missing Frames show. It is the podcast where we watch all of the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. And I also do some fun interviews and lots of Superman stuff too. Go check those out. Lots of interviews with great writers and creators. My most recent Superman interview was with Neva Howell announcing her return as Ma Kent in Man of Tomorrow, which is very exciting. No big spoiler details, of course, but some fun stuff in there. So check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad that you got to connect with her again. So I encourage everyone to check that out. Audience, enjoy Supergirl. I really hope that you guys get to go and that you enjoy and you have a fun time. And we will see you on the other side. So like I said, make sure you come back at the end of this week for our first spoiler-filled reaction episode, followed by second impressions a week from when you were hearing this. And as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.